Hello and welcome to today's event about the what, why and how of SMB cybersecurity risk management. I'm delighted that you can join us today where we have a great panel of experts who will dive into this topic much deeper. So let's jump straight in and meet them. I would like to introduce our host for today, Mike Battistella. Mike joins us today and he is the president of Solution Cubed, an award-winning IT service management and cybersecurity services business. Welcome to today's event, Mike.
Thanks, Shanice. I'm looking forward to it and hearing what this great panelist has to share with us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And our next panelist for today is Rick Lemieux. He is the founding member and chief product officer, and he is responsible for his company's NIST Cybersecurity Professional, and his organization is accredited and an award-winning certification training program. Hello, Rick. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Shanice. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you on board and can't wait to hear more insights from you. Our next panelist for today is Daniel Eliot. Daniel is the lead for small business engagement within the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Applied Security, Cybersecurity Division.
Hey, everyone.
Wonderful to have you on board. We look forward to hearing your answers. And our next panelist today is Battistella O'Brien, and she is the founder and CEO of Dapple Security, a cybersecurity company protecting SMBs against phishing and ransomware by securing workforce logins.
Morning. Good to see everyone.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. And our next panelist for today is Jeff Edwards. Jeff is the co-founder and co-chair of Safe House Initiative org. Welcome to today's event, Jeff.
Thank you, Shanice. Glad to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Our next panelist for today is Joe Vigorito, and he is the Vice President and Digital Business Risk Officer for Solutions Cubed, providing leadership and oversight for cybersecurity, IT management, and IT operations management practices. Welcome to the panel, Joe.
Good morning, Shanice. Great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you. And our next panelist is Kelly Rosner. She is the CEO and State Director of the New Jersey Small Business Development Center, where she drives strategic initiatives to empower underserved communities. Thanks for joining us today, Kelly.
It's great to be here, Shanice. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I am going to hand over to our host now, Mike. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you so much. And panelists, again, thank you for joining this discussion. And we have a lot to cover, a lot of ground. And so let's dive right into it. First thing, it's important, we're talking about risk management for small and medium-sized businesses. So when we talk about SMBs, what is it about, risk management that's so important? So I'm going to, kind of round robin it very, very quickly right through. Rick, I'm going to start with you and go to Daniel and Battistella, Jeff, Joe, and Kelly. We all know that small businesses are important, but how would you articulate that fact to the SMB audience that we have here today? Rick, can you start?
Sure, absolutely, Mike. Excuse me. The small businesses are participants in this digital world that we live in today. I mean, everything we touch is, involves digital at some level, whether it's your phone, your website, your overall business, and so on and so forth. So, and SMBs play a very important role in that, not only in delivering services locally, but being part of the larger supply chain as well. So it's really important for them to, look at risk as something, very serious to their business and their business survival in this world we live in today. So they play a role not only for themselves, but also for the others that are part of their digital supply chain as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Jeff?
Yeah, and I think that if you take a look at for the last 30 years since 1995, the job growth is being driven by SMBs. 60% or more of the job growth is originated from the small, mid-sized businesses, and beyond the GDP, which is nearly half of the GDP of the U.S. So I think it's it's important that we protect them. Thank you.
So, Kelly?
Yeah. So to just tag along on that, 97% of almost all the businesses in every state are small and medium size based on our federal standards. I want to make sure that everybody understands 500 or less employees fits into those categories. So this is very important for them, not just about the job growth, but also innovation and also making sure that people are globally competitive. So cyber is so important for businesses to ensure that whatever product or service that they're selling, providing, whatever it might be, that they take care of themselves, so that they are we all state that they're the backbone of the economy. They truly are. And there's where the job growth is. That's where the innovation is going to lie in the small and medium-sized businesses. And our goal is to help them grow into large businesses.
That's great, Kelly. And you know, we had another question lined up here. Kind of the role that small businesses play in the economy, and you kind of hit that. And I've often talked with small businesses, and some of them don't feel like they play this important role, and yet you shared the numbers with us. And over the last decade or more, how many times have we heard our politicians say we're going to rebuild the economy on the backs of small businesses? So, Kelly, if you could you pick up a little bit more about the role that small businesses play specifically in the economy,
So
and maybe what impact it would have if they were not around or available to do that?
Right. So if you talk about the communities, and I'm going to take it down to grassroots, the communities, if you want to grow local and regional economies, that's with your small businesses. Even during, the pandemic, and I hate to keep bringing that up, we saw a lot of businesses go under, but we also saw a lot of businesses create and start during that time. There's such innovations where there's devastation or there's loss. People think about the innovations of how to fix problems. I like to say that small and medium-sized businesses are the fixers of our economy. They're the ones that are going to fill those gaps. They're the ones that look and see what the needs are of, I go back to regional in local communities, because we all have to make sure that those grow. Every large business needs a small business to support them. So you can't have a large business in any local or regional area without small businesses that are going to be there to support them, whether it's restaurants, whether it's services, whatever it may be. It is so crucial. And these businesses really are important to ensure that that growth continues. So our job is to make sure that they stay in business, or we provide those resources to help them start, grow, and maybe expand.
That's very insightful, Kelly. Thank you so much. Rick, you have something you want to share. Let's hear that.
Just to play off of what Kelly just said, which was very, very important. When the pandemic hit, it hit small businesses really hard because people weren't able to leave their homes or go visit those businesses to get whatever those businesses were selling. So those businesses needed to adapt very quickly to the world of digital. Some of them had no digital capabilities when the pandemic started, but they had to quickly add those capabilities so they could still, drive revenue and keep their businesses in business during that time frame. So they are extremely, they had to become extremely innovative very, very quickly. So I think, the pandemic, while it had lots of negative effects, it also had some positive effects in helping these small businesses understand how they could reach their customer base, or a customer base, or even a larger customer base as a result of engaging with the customer digitally. And so what that does is it opens up a whole new frontier of opportunities for these businesses, but it also exposes them to a whole new level of risk that they need to think about as part of their day-to-day business operations.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah, and also the use and leverage of technology is the only way that small businesses can compete effectively against large corporations. So it's the leverage of technology, I think.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Daniel?
Yeah, I'll just add that running a a small business is a lot about managing risk, right? Fire, flood, loss of a critical employee. And what we hope to achieve in today's discussion is elevating cybersecurity risk management into that portfolio of considerations as you're thinking about what are the risks, all the different risks that could face my business or hit my business, and how can I begin to take steps to reduce those risks or the impact if something is to happen. And so, as you think about risk management, we're really hoping to elevate cybersecurity risk management into that larger discussion of risk. But I'll add that, as we've touched on, small businesses are so critical to our economy. As we've highlighted, they're in every industry and every sector of the economy, and they contribute significantly to our nation's innovation and to our industrial competitiveness all around the globe. And so it's important, if you want to stay in business, to be thinking about risk management in a strategic way. So
That's awesome. Kelly made a great point. There's a lot of large businesses out there that are supported by small businesses. And sometimes it's the small business understanding the role that they play, because they do play an important role. And some of it is just them recognizing that they do have digital assets and they do have something that's of worth to the business. Rick, I'd like to start with you. What does it mean to be a digital business, and why is that perspective that all businesses are digital in some form or another?
Well, I think I can pretty safely say that pretty much every business today is a digital business. If they have a cell phone, or if they have an internet connection, or if they have a website, they're a digital business. Okay. And what that basically means is that they have access, or they have an opportunity to access their customers through the digital infrastructure. But at the same time, the adversaries have an opportunity to access their businesses through that same connection. Okay. So it's really important for businesses to, first of all, understand that they are a digital business, whether it's just their cell phone, a website, an internet connection, or some other capability services that they offer, to market their products. They are a digital business, and they need to, as Daniel covered previously, is they need to factor digital risk into their overall risk strategy and program. And I know that sounds really silly if you think about it from a small business. If I'm a small pizza shop and all I really think about is pizza and pepperoni and all that other good stuff, why do I need to be thinking about digital? Well, because it's now part of your business strategy. It's now part of your business infrastructure. While you're making pizzas and whatever else is great, that's the product that you deliver. How people order those products and how you communicate with your customers is through the digital environment. So you really need to be thinking about digital the same way you think about physical in terms of your business structures and so on.
Right on. Vidalia, then Kelly and Joe.
Yeah, so one thing that I find really important to understand is that no business is too small to be vulnerable. I love serving small and mid-sized businesses. My own company is a small and mid-sized, small business. And I even had an incident where someone was texting my contractors claiming to be me, asking them to do things like buy gift cards or transfer money. And so I think it's tempting sometimes to feel like, oh, I'm so small, I'm immune, no one's going to care about me. But like that was as simple as people who are working with me have access to phones, and somehow, someone was trying to use that to their advantage. So just remembering that, again, right, like everyone's been saying, if we have a website, if we even are using phones, if we're using email, that all of those systems are something we need to think about protecting.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly?
So just going back to the original question about businesses being, part of the digital platform and things like that. Every business is part of a digital platform. Every business needs to make sure that they understand that. If you have a website, as was mentioned earlier, you're global. You have to consider that. You have to think about the sales that you're making across a digital world, right? Your point of sales, are you taking credit cards? You have to think about these things as you're going into any types of businesses that you're going to do. If you have a website and you want to take money over, secured over, the internet, you have to make sure that you understand that is digital. You are part of the digital economy, and businesses have to keep that in mind as they're putting their plans ahead, as they're planning for the future. What are the things that I need to consider and be careful about as we're going through that? Again, going back to earlier with the pandemic, I hate to keep bringing that up, but that was a huge revelation for small and medium-sized businesses, that if you did not have a digital platform, you were going to be obsolete. You're going to go out of business. Even some of the services, or like, I'll bring up a bridal shop. People will look for things online. They'll want to go try it on, but then what do? They'll go back to the internet and they purchase that dress or that product or whatever it is. This is the reality of the world we face in now. Groceries are delivered to you. Anything that you need can be delivered right to your door. So again, people need to understand, or small businesses and medium-sized businesses need to understand, that's where they fit into this world. They are digital, and they need to really understand that as we're moving forward.
That's a great point, Kelly. And it immediately made me think of the drones flying all over New Jersey. They were just delivering groceries, What's the big deal?
Sure.
Great. And also, as we talk about, small businesses recognizing that they play a role in the economy. And I know I've said it many times, we've heard our politicians say over the years, we're going to rebuild the economy on the backs of small businesses. That should be key. And how many times have we heard that, there are countries out there that don't like us very much, but they would never take us on militarily, but they'll take us on in cyber warfare.
Sure.
And Kelly, you just hit it. As soon as you have a website, and Rick, you refer to this too, you have a website, you are global. And so now there's adversaries out there. Joe, why don't you share as well?
Yes, thank you, Mike. So just a couple of things. One is, sometimes numbers can be a little bit deceptive, but 2005, 20 years ago, only 10% of the average organization's assets were in digital form. Now that number sits between 80 and 90%. So I always ask people, listen, if you got hit with a ransomware attack and you lost 80 to 90% of your assets, would you be able to continue operating? And of course, the answer invariably in that situation is no, that would be devastating to us. So that area of transformation management, traversing the chasm and saying, hey, I don't have paper in a file cabinet anymore. I now do business over the web, right? I have an e-commerce economy type business. What are the things that I need to do to help protect that? And that's what we try to really drill into people's heads. And then I think, going back to what Daniel said earlier, this isn't about just making money anymore. We're protecting lives with these digital businesses. Think about going back to Kelly's example of COVID, right? In the pandemic, all the refrigeration units housing all of that vaccine and how those get monitored. Even today, that hasn't changed. That's one of the results of the pandemic. So, everything that we do is pervaded by how we handle data in digital format. So, the notion that, hey, this is only for bigger organizations, it's not. It affects SMBs as much, if not even more than bigger organizations. Bigger organizations have a bigger margin for error, right? So I think that's an important distinction to make.
Joe, I'm going to keep you on the platform for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Share with us what you believe are the biggest misconceptions that small businesses have about cybersecurity and their need for it or their disdain for it. Share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mike. We could almost take an entire session about that. So the first one is we're just too small to matter, right? We don't have the formula for Coca-Cola. But going back to what we were just talking about, you've got something that's worthy of an adversary's attention. You've got data, and data is worth money. As we know, every record, every digital record that you keep inside your enterprise has a dollar value associated with it. It might be $5, it might be $200. In the case of a healthcare record, it might be significantly more than that. So, I don't want anybody walking away thinking, I don't have anything that's worth, any amount of money, because I guarantee that you do. And most adversaries are making their attacks based off of what they think they can get you to provide and put forth. And then the other thing that I'll say is, you know, cybersecurity is a business issue. It's not a technology issue. So, so for those out there who believe cybersecurity falls under the domain of information technology, and therefore information technology needs to, and I'll put air quotes around this, take care of everything. That's just not the case. So that will never lead to long-term sustained success. So, understand everyone has to play a role in maintaining the hygiene that you need to have to operate your business. So I know there's a bunch of hands raised, so I want to be able to hand it off to, to others to add to that.
Hot topic. All of a sudden they all went up. So hot
Absolutely.
topic.
Yep.
Daniel and then Gedalia.
Yeah, thanks. I want to add to what Joe was just talking about, which is the technology issue. A lot of people think cybersecurity, so they automatically think applying a new technology product is going to solve my cybersecurity. That's it. And one of the things I want to highlight is that cybersecurity risk management is much more than just the application of technology to secure your data or your systems. It's also having policies and procedures in place. It is doing vetting of your employees. It is, having proper contracts and statements of work with your vendors and clients. And so there's a lot more that goes into it, even physical security, making sure that people can't walk in and steal your server, or, if you have a physical server in your office. So thinking of kind of the physical and the governance components of your business in terms of cybersecurity is a big component of keeping your business safe versus just only applying technology to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I want to add on to what Joe said, absolutely, if you sit back and think about it, you do have assets that are of value. The other thing I don't want to forget is we all also have money, just plain money. And one of the most, really the most common attacks that I see are around things like wire fraud, invoice fraud, where someone will get into your systems and maybe send fake invoices to your clients, or launch a ransomware attack and try to extort that money out of you, or convince one of your employees to buy a bunch of gift cards that then the hackers will go and spend. So don't forget that it may be just as simple as trying to get your money out of your hands or your client's hands and into the attacker's hands as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Yeah. And I want to just add a little bit different angle to this. It's about planning. It's about making sure that the businesses have a plan in place, not just about the protocols, not just about making sure you have policies in place. It's the planning of the business. What happens if plan A, B, and C? We talk about supply chain. We talk about people losing clients. We talk about data loss. If you lose your business, do you have all your eggs in one basket? And if you lose 80% of that, will you still stay in business? So I want to make sure, first of all, people understand it's about planning. It's about making sure that we talk to businesses all the time about making sure you plan 6 months to a year out. This is no difference. People think that it's very costly. It doesn't have to be costly. Making sure that your data is secure is probably one of the most important things that you can do, not only to make you less competitive, because last thing you want to do is lose your business to another business in competitive. So we talk about competitive analysis. We talk about, again, it goes back to that planning side of it. but small medium-sized businesses need to understand that there's an investment that needs to be made, but on the other end, it's twofold, threefold to make sure that they keep their data secure, that they don't lose information. And I'll go back to, in many communities, it's about trust. How many of you have had your data breached? Would you go back to that company? I don't think so. I mean, I even have in my bank account that it's just like, I just have to say it's pure laziness why I haven't changed. But how many times does my data have to be breached before I need to change to a different vendor, a different organization that I want to work with? So in many communities, and I'll go back to local and regional communities, it really is about the community trusting you that if they're going to work with you and do business with you, that it's secure and their information is going to be used for the good, not for the bad of what might be out there.
Yeah, good point, Kelly. And I think also, data has value, but it also has obligations. You have to understand the obligations you have to your customers, to your partners, to, for reputational harm to yourself. But more importantly, there's regulatory requirements for many. So, protecting data is not just the value of it, it's the obligation.
Oh, I'll tell you, all excellent points. And I'm going to wrap it all up into a nice package and put a big bow on it. It's about two critical things for small businesses. One is they must protect the data. I think it was Kelly and others who talked about the types of data that they're collecting, from credit cards. They might be storing that on their local server. They might have other information about their clients or suppliers that, if it got into the wrong hands, could become a nightmare, not only for them as a business, but for all of the people that they deal with. So it's really important that they have a plan to protect the data. The second thing they need to protect is their resiliency as a business. Once again, that was brought up as well. If they get ransomware or if they get attacked and customers no longer trust them as a supplier, they're out of business, right? So they have to protect the data. They have to put in place the mechanisms to protect their resiliency as well, so they can stay in business and survive what's going to happen to them. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because everyone will be attacked at some level. But if you've got the mechanisms in place to protect yourself and the resiliency of your business, that will be good. The last point I'll make is that small businesses need to make a commitment to this. What that basically means is that one person in a small business must be trained with the skills to understand information technology. It could be something as simple as a PC or a server or the network that they interconnect to. They need to understand what they need to do when an incident does happen. A lot of times organizations get hit with an attack. They don't know what to do. They do the wrong thing and they create more problems for their business as a result of it. So they need to have an incident response plan. And I know that sounds silly for a small business, but they are attacked just like the big boys are. And even the big boys fail at incident response as well. So that's something they need to consider right up front. The third thing is they need to look at everything about their business through a risk lens, not just a digital risk lens, but a physical risk lens, as Danielle pointed out earlier. And that's really, really important. And by having that one person on your staff trained with those skills, that person can either lead the effort to secure and protect the data and the resiliency of the small business, or work with an MSP who will do it for them. But the customer is in control of the narrative, in control of the outcome, because they have someone on their team capable of understanding those things that are critical, core mission critical to their business, and to work with the supplier to ensure that they get those capabilities to protect the data and to protect the resiliency.
Now that's a bow worth wrapping up that gift with. So thanks, Rick. And you hit a key point. Well, a couple of key points that I'll probably save for a little bit later. But I want to come back to you, Rick, to start, and then Joe, and then everybody jump in as they want. We talked about the business, and what they should do as the business. But what about the third party suppliers? What about those that are working with the business? Kelly brought up a great point that you've got these large businesses that really utilize small businesses. But what about the suppliers that are interacting with the small business? How do they protect themselves against the risk that is associated with their supply chain.
Mike, that's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up because it just builds on what I had said before. You know, governments, especially the U.S. government, has worked hard to create standardization, all right, around risk management. That's why the NIST cybersecurity framework was created. For those who are on the webinar today, you get an opportunity. You might want to look up the NIST cybersecurity framework. And the NIST provides great resources and education on that particular topic. But what it does is it creates standardization. It talks about the 6 critical functions that organizations need to have in place in order to protect their data and their resilience. Daniel mentioned earlier about governance. You need to have a plan. What are the rules? What are the rules the business is going to operate under in protecting its risk? Right? You need to have the ability to identify and to protect and to detect, respond, and recover from a cyber attack. So you need to have these core mission critical functions in place, in order to protect your business as you possibly can. What standardization also does is it gives you an opportunity to share that requirement with your supply chain. So if you're going to work with people who are going to be part of your delivery system, whether they be providing you materials for the products that you build or whatever the case may be, you need to ensure that they have the same capabilities you have. So your risk is once again reduced as a result of everyone operating off of a common footprint or a common standard. So that's why it's really important for the small businesses to not only worry about their own little world, but also expand that world into their entire supply chain and understand and ask the questions. What do you do to protect my data and to protect, my business from being attacked by someone who's coming into your business? Those are questions that every small business must be asking their supply chain.
Excellent. Joe?
Yeah, I'll add to what Rick said. Rick nailed a couple of great points there. But in addition, question your third parties carefully. Never assume that they take cybersecurity and privacy as seriously as you do, right? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but you need to ascertain that. And what you need to do is really supervise, oversee, provide vigilance as to what data do they have access to in my organization, and how can a risk that they introduce harm me? What can it do to my clients? What can it do to my reputation? What can it do to trust? A couple of people have mentioned trust today. So, have a third party risk management process. And I don't just mean, ask your third parties, what are they doing? Because, very often the people who the business is speaking to don't know what's being done inside of that third party from a risk management standpoint. So make sure you ask the right questions. Make sure you have an objective baseline. You heard Rick mention NIST a couple of times, and I'm sure Daniel can speak to this as well. But be very sure that you're asking the same questions that are being asked of you internally. And also be prepared that the third party is going to come back to you and ask you many of the same things. So really make it bi-directional in nature, but use a framework to make sure that you are, kind of adjudicating their position and their hygiene against an existing baseline. So, hopefully that helps everybody on the third party risk management side of things.
So just adding on to that third party risk, I also think that it's important to do your research on those individuals. People think it's like, oh, I think that this is a good company. Do your research. Look into that company. Look at what they've done and what they haven't done. Look at how many incidences happen. Do your assessment on these groups. Don't just assume because they're out there in the third party. Because remember, you don't know where they're coming from. And in some cases, unless you do that research, unless you look into it. I'm a huge advocate. And again, as part of the SBDC in New Jersey, we tell people to make sure that you have your backup plans. What happens if that third party vendor goes away? you're then vulnerable. And for us, we want to make sure that businesses are not vulnerable, that they're secure, that they have their plans in place. Again, we talk about planning ahead, but it's also about doing research and doing your due diligence, and just don't assume that they're going to take care of you. You have to look into that. That if I can give advice to anybody, it's to make sure that you really do look into the people that you're working with, the vendors you're working with, and the organizations that you're working with before you leap. Don't just have the leap of faith. Do the research before you leap.
Yeah, Kelly, good point. Because as simple as the backups. I mean, do you really know where your data is? It's like, well, my MSP backs it up. It's all taken care of, or I back it up to the cloud. Do you understand what that cloud looks like? Do you understand the frailties of it? Do you understand what your MSP is doing? And when's the last time you could test it? And could you restore that environment? And how long would it take to restore? And how long till the next backup? And what is that window? You're going to lose things if you get hit and you're down. So those are just basics in terms of third-party risk.
Jump right in.
Yeah. So, and maybe this addresses one of the questions that we got live around kind of what messages can be a call to action for us as small and mid-sized businesses if we think we're immune, because a lot of this can, even around vendor management, can feel very ephemeral or kind of like, oh, hypothetical. But one thing that I find resonates with me and the small and mid-sized businesses that I work with is, don't forget that your larger customers and investors, those kind of folks, are going to ask you some of these tough questions. And you don't want to be scrambling at the last minute to say, oh yeah, we have a vendor risk management plan in place. We, have asked them all the questions that we need to be asking, and we have done the research like Kelly was referring to. So for me, in addition to just, yes, of course, managing the cybersecurity risk, but it's really business risk too. If you are asked those hard questions by folks who are trying to either invest money or give you a large client contract, are you going to be able to answer the tough questions that they have for you?
You guys hit some really. Oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to add on just one little snippet too, that we all talk about disaster preparation. We saw what happened in LA. We see what happens all over the world. We see with supply chain issues. We see all of that. Businesses need to remember that disaster preparedness is not just getting my hard copies. It's also planning for the future. Nobody wants to plan for a disaster. Nobody thinks that's sexy. Disaster preparedness is not sexy. Nobody wants to do it until, oh my God, a disaster hit. Now, all of a sudden, why didn't I plan? So part of that plan should include your cyber risk, should include that data backup, the cloud. Where is it? Where is your data being kept? As what was mentioned earlier, was it in LA? Is that company in LA? And is it still there with all the fires that took place? Where is your information? You need to know where that is. Knowledge is king. Knowledge is so important to stay in business and to make sure you're able to grow. But if you don't include cyber in that disaster preparation plan, then you're at a loss, and it could be devastating, and it could mean the difference between staying in business and exiting your business, good, bad, or indifferent.
Just one more tidbit. I'll make it real quick. I promise.
I promise.
Right? These are all great points. All right. These are excellent points. And I think it all comes down to, culture and leadership. All right. Business owners need to take responsibility for their businesses and the team that supports their businesses and the suppliers that support their businesses. So they need to bring home the fact that risk is at the top of the list for businesses today. And we all need to be thinking along these lines together. And how do we stay ahead of this? All right. How do we continually innovate? How do we encourage our employees to tell us about things that we might not be aware of? Right. These are, even though they're small businesses, there may be 4 or 5 people in the company. I think someone used an example earlier of a potential breach. We went through the same exact thing. Somebody sent us an invoice, said I approved it for $20,000. $20,000 to my business would be a big hole in my bank account. But thank God we had two-factor authentication in place as far as approvals go. We were able to catch it. So you can imagine how many small businesses who might not even have a website, but basically have suppliers. So they get emails that say you need to pay this bill, and it could be someone impersonating someone else, and basically the money's flowing out the door. So you will have to establish a culture of everything is a risk. Everything that happens in the business is a risk. And I know I don't want to view the world through a negative lens, but we live in an environment with digital where negative has to come first, and then you can look at the positives. Because if you do take care of the negative, the positives will come out, as a result of that. So just wanted to share that as well.
No, all great points. Kelly shared that, being proactive effectively, right? We get involved in doing gap assessments with various cybersecurity frameworks and identifying those gaps. And many times the organizations have no clue that they have the gaps because the conversation starts, oh yeah, we do that, yeah, we do that. And then you dig into it, they're not doing it. And we often lead incident response teams, and it's so interesting because Kelly, you talked about the planning. You got to plan for the inevitable, right? And there's a dozen reasons why not to do it. But now you're trying to figure out while the building is burning down, you're trying to figure out what you should be doing. That's the worst time to try to figure it out because you're not thinking clearly and whatnot. And Gedalia, you mentioned some things that you need to ask and you need to be aware of. Why are small businesses afraid to ask their MSP? Do they have a system security plan? Do they have a security program that they're following? Do they have metrics that they can provide? So not only are we helping organizations, but we have to talk to the MSPs. And how many times we're talking to the MSPs like, oh no, we do all that. We do that. Can you show me the documentation? Mm-hmm. And that is a common theme that it's kind of trust but verify. That's the verify part. If they say they're doing it, they've got to validate that they're doing it, or they're not going to pass the audit. And Rick, I love what you said before, about the leaders. It's a leadership thing. Here's the thing. If I'm in a certain role within the organization and my leaders are telling me no, 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 and I'm like, I can't do it, I can't push, blah, blah, blah. Well, but then when the issue happens, who gets blamed? The CISO, the IT direct, the same folks that are saying we need to do this. And if the C-level is not bought into it, when a breach does happen, it's the people under them that get blamed. And so it really is a cultural thing that has to be addressed, and leaders have to take ownership. So, wow, you guys just rocked it on that one. Hey, so we talked a lot about things happening with organizations and what happens to them when they're breached. And I want to read some stats, and as I go through them, you guys think about how you want to contribute to the discussion. But here are some stats. This is all from 2024, as early as 2023, but they're recent. National Cybersecurity Alliance found that 60% of small businesses, 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months after a cyber attack. That's actually a stat that I've seen over the last 6 or 8 years. What does that tell me? If 6 or 8 years ago, we were talking about 60% of small businesses go out after a cyber attack, that says we're not doing things to mitigate that and to try to prevent that. The financial impact, this number is huge. Global average cost of a data breach reached $4.45 million. In Australia, small businesses reported an average loss of $50,000 per cyber incident. Ransomware attacks up 82% with companies fewer than 1,000 employees. And the list goes on. I've got 2 pages worth of, stats. Based on that, what are some of your thoughts when it comes to, and Gedalia, I'm going to start with you on this. How can small businesses really prioritize the most critical cyber risks that they face?
Yeah, it's overwhelming to hear, right? Because we're starting to see that it's becoming more affordable for threat actors to propagate these really wide scale attacks and kind of take this spray and pray approach, which is why we're seeing even more and more of this come into play, that there is no business that's too small, because they're just going to throw it out there, and wherever the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses are, that's what's going to stick. And so it can feel overwhelming to say, well, how do I figure out how to protect myself? So there is, a framework that cybersecurity practitioners use, where we think about breaking down risk into the vulnerability and the threat. So don't worry too much about the terminology, but really it's a combination of a vulnerability. So seeing that there's some kind of weakness that an attacker could take advantage of. But do we have to worry about every vulnerability? Probably not. We also have to couple that with, well, what are the what's the probability that someone actually will take advantage of that? So it's both that the vulnerability has to exist, but also that the threat has to be, a realistic probability of happening. That's when I have to start addressing it. So let's bring that down to something concrete. For example, if I know that all of my employees, they're just using weak passwords, no multi-factor authentication to get into all of our systems, I know that's a vulnerability. How probable is it that's going to be taken advantage of? Very. If you do a little bit of research, you'll see that up to 90% of breaches will start with, a stolen login. So if those logins are easy to steal, you can bet that you're going to be taken advantage of in that way. So that's a combination of the vulnerability exists, and there's a very high probability that an attacker is going to take advantage of it. On the other end of the spectrum, there are, if anyone's used these little USB sticks, they're called YubiKeys. They're one way that folks can use to log in securely. Over the summer, there was this big news article about how YubiKeys had this big vulnerability, right? So everyone started freaking out. Do I need to stop using my YubiKeys? Are they now vulnerable? But if you actually dig into that vulnerability, someone would have to have physical access to the YubiKey. They have to have this way of kind of opening it up, peeling back the hardware, launching something called a side channel attack, which is very sophisticated. And if you take a step back, it would have to be pretty much a nation state actor who's going to try to take advantage of that vulnerability. So the threat, is it really there? Probably not. So, I was counseling people that those YubiKeys most likely are just fine for you to keep on using. So anyway, just thinking about combining when I'm prioritizing. Yes, there's all sorts of vulnerabilities, but trying to tackle the ones first where the probability that that's going to actually lead to a breach is the highest.
Yeah, just to build on what Gedalia said, Mike, you gave a great stat before, which is IBM cost of a data breach, 4.45 million for enterprises. So let's just say for a small business, that's not the number. Let's say the number is half that, right? Let's say it's a little over $2 million. Well, I don't know too many small businesses that can take a $2 million breach hit and still come out and survive that. But what the IBM report goes on to say, and has said for several years, is if you author and then tabletop an incident response plan, and if you author and tabletop your business continuity and DR planning, as we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, you can shave that number down by 50%. So now a $2 million breach becomes a $1 million breach, right? So I want everybody to kind of think about that. For the cost of writing 2 policies, 2 plans, right, which doesn't cost very much, and then do tabletop testing on them, you can take your breach experience and bring down your exposure by 50%, regardless of what the originating number is. So very important to keep that in mind. And then, the other thing that I'll say is, look, 55% of people in the US say they don't like doing business with organizations who've undergone a data breach, right? We've all gotten those letters in the mail, right? And the letter says, hey, we're sorry to report, we're going to sign you up for a year's worth of credit monitoring, which is always interesting, right? Because, hackers know that, and they just wait until more than 1 year has passed, and then they start using the information from there. But we're in a country that doesn't like doing business with people who don't protect us, right? It's all about protection and control. And unfortunately, all too often, we're reporting these incidents and people are walking away and taking their wallets and going someplace else. So, those are, a couple of numbers that I think are expository in nature and definitely tell a story. But I know some other folks have additional items.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing. Fidelio said a really important word, and it's in the question as well, and that's prioritization. And I always go back to the word prioritization because as a small business, I know you're feeling this. You're like, how do I prioritize my limited time, finances, etc., expertise? Many of you may not be cybersecurity experts. I expect many of you are not. You're experts in whatever your business is. And so that prioritization word is really important. And when it comes to cybersecurity, it's thinking about how do I prioritize my resources and my time? So I have, what are the assets, the technologies, or the data that I rely upon to run my business? If I walked into the office tomorrow and they weren't, I didn't have access to them, or they were gone, or they were changed, how would that impact my business? And so prioritizing by thinking about first, what are those most critical assets you need to protect? Your intellectual property, for instance, if you're in an innovation-based business. And also, what are your, Jeff mentioned this earlier, what are your legal, regulatory, contractual requirements? And so not only are you thinking about your most sensitive assets that you want to protect, but what are the requirements that you have that you need to protect certain data or certain assets? And so as you're thinking about prioritization, those are great places to start.
So,
Yeah, all great points. I kind of follow this 3-step process when I help organizations kind of figure this stuff out. They call it my ICM, their ability to identify what assets they have. A lot of them don't even know what they have. So that's a process in itself to make sure they identify all their assets and classify those assets as, as their, how they impact or how they drive the business. Obviously that helps you prioritize, and then obviously mitigate, from the most significant risk, down to, whatever's left on the list. And it's a process you need to go through on a continual basis. It isn't a one and done. It's never a one and done. The threat landscape is changing every microsecond. Every time something new connects to the internet, it creates another risk that we have to deal with. Now, what a lot of businesses have done in the past is purchased insurance to kind of, take care of things. Well, as we know from what's happened over the last few years, the insurance industry is taking a beating on paying out ransomware fees and so on and so forth. So they're now looking at things through a different lens themselves, saying, we'll be glad to insure you, but we need to understand what that risk is. So if you don't have these capabilities in place today, you can get a premium, but you're going to pay substantially for that. But if you take the time and make the investments, then your premium will be lower, and you'll be able to mitigate the risk that you don't know about. That's really the focus of the insurance policy, is to take care of things you just don't know about. You didn't anticipate, or you couldn't anticipate, and so on. So I think it's a situation where, and this is a tough one because it's been said many times on this session that you're talking to people who don't really understand the world of digital, and they need to get knowledgeable about it. They need to understand it because it's core and mission critical to who they are today. So I think, that's where I think in a small business, that conversation needs to start with the owner or the CEO or some C-level operational level executive who has responsibility for the overall business. Because if you can't get them on board, and then they're the only ones who can push that message downstream and to get other people to do the things that need to get done. Because if the boss isn't doing it, no one else is going to do it. So it's really, really key to get that leadership team involved early on and make them, an active owner and member of the team.
thanks, Rick. Good info. Made me think of a number of things around insurance, but we'll save that for another discussion. I think the majority of the panel, we're all small businesses. Not everyone, but the majority. And we all kind of face the same thing. We don't have the budget that the larger companies have. Maybe we don't have the skills on the bench, the breadth. I hesitated saying that because this is the field that we're in, and I don't want to communicate that either. But a lot of small companies just don't have the skill set, and they don't necessarily have the tools, the fancy tools that the big guys are using and whatnot. So we're all kind of in the same boat, that we have a number of areas that, yeah, we want to do, but we can't necessarily do. So, Jeff, I'm going to come to you on this and then ask the rest of the panel as they want to jump in. But, what signs might indicate that an SMB's current security risk management approach just may be inadequate and just not enough to keep them cyber safe?
Yeah, I think Rick was getting to it and saying that it starts at the top. And if the person in that mirror happens to run the company or own the company, they have to ask themselves, do I know what to do if I got hit by a cyber attack? Number one, do I have a plan? Is it in my head? Is it on paper? Does somebody own that within my organization? Do I know that Nancy is going to be in charge of making sure that we're ready to go with this incident response plan? If I can't do that, then I probably have a problem. Two, insurance, I think, is a big one. Just by talking to your insurance broker or agent or risk manager of some sort, you'll walk through the options. And I think you'll realize quickly that you benefit greatly from an insurance policy of some sort, because the insurance companies have really developed substantially, especially when it comes to implementing controls and or technologies they recommend. And in the InsurSec space, they're actually implementing packages with technology and the policies themselves. So it's squeezing out the risk. So I would start, if you don't have those types of things involved, and if you don't know where your data is, going back to my earlier policy conversation, and assuming that it's a technical issue, and the IT staff and the MSP, whoever, I have somebody managing the MSP relationship and the MSP is taking care of it, don't assume that. Assumptions are a very bad thing. So if you're making any assumptions at all, you don't know what it is, and you don't have plans for incident response, and or getting back to Kelly's point earlier, it's a larger issue about business continuity, because it's the interruptions that are killing the insurance companies today. It's not the cyber, it's the after effects and the business interruption claims that are really costing the industry. That's the $1 trillion problem, not the $1 billion problem that cyber is.
So just tagging a little bit on that in talking about why businesses don't take on these programs. Mike, you talked about its costs. Many of them look at it, they think that it's costly. But the reality is, if you really did the research, the return on investment versus the risk and the cost of it, you should be building that into your budget. You should be building that into your business plan. You should be thinking about that, because as we talk about being in a digital world, taking credit cards, having a website, all of those things, small businesses, which majority of them are that we deal with anyways, are 20 or less employees. So the cost needs to be, or the dollar amount needs to be budgeted within that plan to make sure that they are secure, that that you're going to be secure. We talked earlier about leadership, about culture. As we teach people and we teach the CEOs and the owners, if you don't know your financials and you're leaving it up to somebody else, then that's where you may be losing money. There could be embezzlement. There could be all sorts of loss of funding. There's no difference with cyber. If you, as the leader, do not know how to deal with a cyber attack or understand whether you're secure or understand what the protocols are in place, you're at a loss as the owner of that business, as the leader of that organization. So it is top down. So you might not be fluent in it as a CEO, the leader, the owner, sole proprietor, whatever your business is. But if you're not aware of it, then you are going to be at risk. You don't have to be, as I mentioned, fluent in it, but you need to understand and aware if that person is out or that person leaves, understand what you need to do to keep that business secure and make sure that you're not going to lose those funds. And again, I go back to return on investment. Look at the risk versus the return on investment that you're doing. It's a small amount of money to invest into it to make sure that you're not going to lose large sums of dollars.
Excellent.
I think Kelly spot on, Jeff spot on. And, it's interesting. Small businesses they're always watching the dollar, and they should. Okay. So they're worried about, if I'm investing this dollar, what am I going to get in return for that dollar? What most small businesses end up doing when they can't afford someone else to come in and do it for them, they go get trained. They get trained or get somebody on their team trained to do it themselves. I do it every day. We're a 4-person business, and basically I'm on the internet every day researching, well, I got to do this thing on my website. If I hire a web developer, it's going to cost me this. If I go out and figure out how to do it myself, it doesn't cost me anything other than my time, which is important, but it's what I can afford at this point in time. So I think that's true for most small businesses. When they can't afford something, training is the fallback plan, because in most cases, training can be cost effective and it can deliver the outcome that they're looking for. Okay. So I think it's important for leadership to be trained first. And one of the challenges we have seen over the last 10 years that we've been in this particular space is that we have no problem convincing, the CISOs and the IT directors and those responsible for risk and whatever else on the value of, what we teach and what they need to do. The problem is getting that up to the next layer and getting sign off on, on the authorization for funding. And that's because the C-level executives or the owners or corporate executives don't understand the outcomes of their decisions. All right. In other words, there's education that needs to take place at that level, saying if these situations are presented to your business and you make these decisions, this is the outcome and this is the impact. And it all ties back to everything we've been talking about today. The immediate cost of $1 billion and the extended cost of $1 trillion. All right. So there's a lot of those things that need to happen at the executive level. And I know the regulators have been doing a good job of creating new regulations and saying, you're going to be held personally accountable and so on and so forth. But, I still think a lot of senior leaders don't take that serious. They just say, it'll be covered by our insurance or be covered by the bank account because, the cost of the breach is less than the investment or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there really needs to, where I'm going with this whole thing is basically education. It's either education at a small business level or an owner's level or both levels in order for them to be able to move forward if they think they can't afford the solution that would help protect their resiliency and protect their data.
Right.
Yeah, and Rick, I think education's key. I'm a big fan of it, but I think a lot of people say education owes time, investment. So if you just get awareness programs, 15 seconds or less, and say, if an email looks like this, do not click on that. Period, done, simple. So awareness is, those small little steps make huge differences because phishing is the biggest problem you have. So do an awareness program just on that. It's that simple.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of awareness training, and a lot of organizations think, well, that's an expensive thing. And when you really look at some of the platforms that are out there and what's available, 3 to 5 minute video once a week, once every other week, that for a year, that seat would cost less than lunch, and for a large organization, less than a Starbucks coffee. Come on, So it really isn't an expensive undertaking. And we're still at that area where 80% of what happens starts with the human interaction. So why wouldn't we invest there significantly?
So Mike and Jeff, are you trying to tell me that the IRS really isn't coming after me and putting me in jail because I didn't pay my taxes? Is that the latest thing?
I cannot deny or confirm.
All right, I better take control back of this panel here. So, hey, I want to direct this next question specifically to Gedalia and Joe. We talked a lot about the things that should be being done. What are you guys doing from a cybersecurity standpoint within your organization that maybe can fit into that model where the small business doesn't have a lot of money, or they don't have, a team of experts on staff. What are you guys doing to address this whole cybersecurity issue? But more importantly, doing it without disrupting the day-to-day operations of that business.
Yeah, so I'm maybe this is part of what you were asking, which is, okay, of all these things we've been talking about, what are the things I can be doing? That maybe if I chose two of them, what could I do? And this is what I help folks with. If I usually say, if there are two things to just start with doing today that are relatively affordable and shouldn't affect things too much, the first is adopting phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. This does take a little bit more work and adoption because it will change the way that people log in. But it shouldn't be something that takes you more than a day or two to roll out and really train employees to get used to. And it is the number one thing you can do to prevent the majority of breaches, because as we talked about, phishing is the biggest problem. So adopt good phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. And then the second is backups. Again, this shouldn't disrupt your business at all. It's something you're doing in parallel, kind of in the background. But knowing that you have good backups and testing those backup processes is the second thing that I always recommend folks do. If you can really only do a couple, choose two things this year that you're going to invest in. And the power of that, I have seen small businesses be more resilient to a ransomware attack than even some of their much larger counterparts, because they have excellent backup systems in place and they've tested them. Because you know what happens in that case? You get hit by ransomware and you say, okay, fine, we've got our backups. Like, we don't need to pay the ransom. We're all good to go there. That can really make a huge difference. So good MFA and backups, I think, are the things that I'm doing and that I recommend folks do.
Excellent.
Yeah, so great points, Gedalia. I'll just add a couple of things. One is, and a few people have mentioned culture so far today. Do a cultural assessment, right? Understand what the voice from coming down from the top of the house, and Rick has talked about the importance of that voice at the top. Understand what kind of culture you are creating inside of your organization. Understand people's tendencies. Do people feel like they're under tremendous amounts of pressure and therefore they have a tendency to click on things without really thinking or looking at them? Extremely important thing that you can do that does not cost a lot of money at all, that provides benefits and value as you are shaping and contouring. I think Gedalia mentioned it earlier, planning your program and the next steps that you need to take, including phishing campaigns and all types of security awareness training. That's number one. Number two is there's a process out there called compromise assessment. Think of compromise assessment as hey, I don't know if I have somebody lurking around in my environment, but I'm going to guess that the answer is yes. And I am going to do a process to seek them out and find them before they tamper, damage, interdict, or take some action on my network. Great thing to do that rarely gets talked about. It's assumption of an incident without there necessarily being an incident. But this notion of assumption of breach has become extremely important and very popular, knowing that at some point in time, an adversary is going to take some sort of action against you. So why not search out, ferret out, and see if you've got a clean slate and a clean bill of health? It's like going to the doctor and doing a full body scan, and at one of those longevity centers, and understanding, do I have anything wrong? I don't think I do, but I want to make sure. So let me turn it over to the others who have a couple of points.
I just wanted to add, and I'll be really brief, in the sense that I know businesses think they don't have time to do this. I know businesses think that it's costly to train. I know businesses look at the dollar amount for everything. Not just the NJSBDC, but other organizations provide free webinars on this just to get people knowledge of what they should be looking at, what they should be considering. Again, free webinars. You could do it at your own time, your own place, your own location. NJSBDC is just one of them. A lot of organizations do that. If the business would just take a little bit of time to look into where are the resources that are out there, there are a lot of no cost or low cost resources that businesses could tap into. And I'm not trying to take away from the businesses that are on this panel. I'm just talking about really the businesses that are concerned about that, learn to what they need to do or what they need to consider. And then maybe that's where they can hone in their budgets and their time and their effort on, okay, this is the most important thing for me right now. Again, there are resources out there, many of them at no cost or low cost, that can help these small and medium-sized businesses.
That's great. This is my favorite part of every cybersecurity webinar, is getting to what can you do. I want to add, Gedalia had some really great parts. MFA, phishing resistant MFA, and backups, very critical. I'll add two more to that. Updating your software. So when you have a push to update or patch your software, that is not only improving the performance of that software, but it's also closing security vulnerabilities. And so updating your software on your mobile devices and your laptops and your websites, etc., making sure that, if it makes sense for your business, turn on automatic updates. I'm going to add another one that's a process, and that is when there is a request from internally or from externally to change an account number or any account information, when there is a request to transfer funds, that there is a secondary verification, a process within your business where somebody isn't empowered to just say, oh, you want $500,000? You want $20,000? Okay, I trust you. That there is a secondary verification process where they have to ensure that this is a legitimate request. And so I think those are, and that doesn't cost anything, just a little bit of time. And so those are two I wanted to add to what has already been put out there.
Excellent.
And I'll make mine quick, Mike. And just to Daniel's point, when someone tried to get the 20,000 from our company, we ended up hooking up with another organization, contacted us at the same time. We thought they were the crooks too, but they turned out to be the government. And they were actually notifying us that someone had registered a domain name that looked just like ours that morning, and that we would probably be the victim of an attack that afternoon. So there are things happening in the background that I didn't even know about until we got attacked. Anyways, the last thing I'm going to say is I discovered this video yesterday. It was an Amazon video about culture and cybersecurity and what they do internally. They also had Intuit on as a guest. I posted it on my LinkedIn account. You got to go watch this. Every small business owner needs to watch this thing because it talks about how Amazon deals with the cyber threat. Now, you got to understand, Amazon is this mammoth business, all right? But they operate like they're a little small business where the CEO is involved in every single thing involving cybersecurity and knows everybody in the cybersecurity team in the organization. So this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Culture needs to be set at the top and driven down. And if you watch this video, I know I walked away going, wow, someone is actually doing it the right way. And who better than Amazon to demonstrate that based on the experience we have with them every day. And I think every small business should be looking at that video just to kind of get a feel for why that's important.
All right, so to our audience, I'm going to ask somebody go grab that video, put the link in the chat for all the other attendees. That's a good advice. Hey, so we've hit a lot of different areas, and Gedalia, you hit one with the backup and recovery. I love that because that's one of the things I stress too. It's a backup and recovery strategy. Everybody does the backups, or majority do the backups, and they forget about the recovery part is a strategic component, actually more important than the first, because you don't want to be testing your recovery when the house is burning down. So heard a lot of different things. And it's kind of like for our audience, what can we give them that would be of value? Maybe a roadmap. So let me kind of take a try at it. First and foremost, I heard that we need to identify our assets. Secondly, we need to figure out how to protect those assets. And the level of protection is really based on the digital value that asset has. We need to be able to detect when that asset has been compromised. And when it's been compromised, we need to know how to respond appropriately and then recover. And so with that, as we mature down, our path and our journey, we also need to wrap governance around that. So we need to be kind of monitoring what we're doing and adhering to policy and procedure. So Daniel, you and I both know I just described the NIST cybersecurity framework, and you're an expert in that area. Why don't you just give a real brief, because we are running short on time, but a real brief overview of the NIST cybersecurity framework, the risk management framework, and why those are important frameworks for any business, but specifically for our small businesses.
Yeah, that's a tough ask to do those quickly, but I'm going to do my best. So the NIST cybersecurity framework and the NIST risk management framework both were developed by NIST in collaboration with industry and other entities. They're both focused on managing and mitigating cybersecurity risks within an organization. And each one offers a structured approach to doing so. So the risk management framework is more detailed and prescriptive, whereas the cybersecurity framework offers a higher level approach that's more consumable by a non-technical audience. The risk management framework is primarily targeted towards government agencies or contractors, and it's often mandated for compliance, whereas the cybersecurity framework is voluntary and can be adopted by organizations across various sectors. And they're both informed by other standards and guidance. And for this small business community, I'll add that we have a small business quick start guide for the cybersecurity framework. And the CSF, as it's been mentioned here, it's a flexible, technology neutral framework that helps you, regardless of your size or sector maturity, to better understand, assess, prioritize, and communicate your cybersecurity efforts. It's not a one size fits all approach to managing cybersecurity risks, so that it is adaptable to different situations. And we talked about these governing functions or action-oriented cybersecurity outcomes, which are the 6 functions of the cybersecurity framework of govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And then those are broken down in framework into increasingly more granular components. And so I will stop it there, but we'll be sure that you have access to the cybersecurity framework. And if anybody wants to add to that,
I would love to have somebody add to that. How key is it becoming? I don't know. It's becoming kind of the core and cornerstone of most of our cybersecurity frameworks out there. They've adopted the NIST cybersecurity framework as their starting point, and then it becomes industry specific. So it's really becoming important for everyone. Rick?
I'll try to make this as brief as possible. If you cut me open right now, I bleed the framework. So I have a lot of experience in it and been working with clients across the globe and helping them adopt it and adapt it to their business. But to me, it's the best. It's the best thing ever created for cybersecurity, because it does, as Daniel pointed out, it creates standardization with flexibility, adaptability. It doesn't matter what size business you are. The framework will deliver a ton of value and allow you to focus on the outcomes that need to be delivered as a result of that. It's real easy to use. It's very well documented. The 2.0 version is absolutely outstanding. Daniel and I have chatted in the past about all the work that his group has been doing in developing documentation and guidance for the small business community, which he's done a fabulous job. So yeah, this is something that you really need to take seriously. It's not something you can, if you put the time in and you learn, you can do it yourself. If you don't, there's a lot of MSPs and a lot of contractors who can work with you to help you get it into your business. But it is really something that I think delivers a lot of value, specifically in the area of risk management and resiliency management, another key component of keeping your business alive in the event of an attack.
Thanks, Rick. And well, you guys covered a lot of great areas, provided great content. Fantastic. Shanice, can you come back and kind of share your thoughts?
Yeah, this has been such an incredible event today, and the insights shared have been invaluable. And I hope that everyone working in a small to medium-sized business has found this session incredibly beneficial. I'm sure you have, because I have. So let us let us know your experience in the comments, and we'll make sure that we pass those over to our incredible panelists here. So I'm going to work my way around the panel and get your closing remarks. So I'll start with our host first. Mike, is there any comments you'd like to share about today's event?
You know what? We could have gone for 2 more hours. There was so much good information shared. I appreciate everyone's involvement in the panel, but also for the attendees. And, I heard a number of important key elements, the NIST cybersecurity framework, adopting a strategy where culture is important within the organization. There can be small steps that have big payoffs. So just a great discussion, and greatly appreciated everyone.
Absolutely agree with you. There were some fantastic quotes here. So thank you for sharing that with us. Rick, could I have your closing remarks, please?
Sure. No, absolutely. I really enjoyed this panel today. This is a great group of people with some great ideas. A thing I walked away with is that this is not something you can do alone. It truly takes a village, to pull this all together. It involves not only those within your organization itself, those in your supply chain, and those in the resources that the government may be providing, whether or local nonprofit organizations. So take advantage of all those different capabilities that are out there to help you get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today and sharing some incredible answers. Daniel, could I take your closing remarks, please?
Yeah, no business can ever be completely cyber secure. Nevertheless, it is possible and necessary in today's age to implement a cybersecurity risk management program or approach that balances security with the needs and the capabilities of your business. And so it's that concept of continuous improvement and taking this, not taking boil the whole ocean or whatever the phrase is, but just taking this bite-sized piece by piece to address your capabilities and address your needs.
Absolutely. One step at a time, as they say. So thank you for joining us on the panel today, Daniel. It's been great having you here. And we are going to take Battistella, sorry?
Battistella.
Sorry.
Right.
Had a moment there.
Yeah, maybe in the spirit of Daniel's continuous improvement, I've heard the saying, I'm going to do better today than I did yesterday. Maybe it's a little much to improve our cybersecurity literally on a daily basis, but let's do better this month or this year than I did last year in terms of not having to boil the ocean. Anyway, I was really happy that this panel was put together because I think SMBs are too often neglected by the cybersecurity community. And as we stressed here, they're just such an important part of our ecosystem. And it's why I love serving, that community. So I'm always willing to take outreach on LinkedIn or through my website, or, I just want people to feel like they have resources. I'm sure that probably goes for the rest of us on this panel as well. So please, don't hesitate to use us as resources if you just need to know where to start.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And you can find everyone's LinkedIn profiles on the Zoom event that you registered for. So if you would like to connect with anyone on the panel today, please go ahead and do so. Thank you so much. And Jeff, could I take your closing remarks, please?
Well, following on Daniel and Gedalia, do one thing today. Just do one thing, and then let the future take care of itself. And I'd highly recommend doing the backup restore. Do that, and that's it. So thank you all for your insights.
Thank you, Jeff. And Joe, if I could take your closing remarks, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Shanice. I often get asked for just a couple of words that people can take back. And and incorporate it immediately. And typically what I give them is a variation on layer, meaning defense in depth. Don't just choose one mechanism or device or process and hope for the best. Limit, which is the concept of least privilege. Give people what they need, but not more. Diversify. Don't put all of your eggs in one cybersecurity basket, right? Encrypt and write simple policies that human beings can read and understand. If you take those 5 things, you'll be in a lot better shape going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joe. And Kelly, if we could take your closing remarks for today, please.
Sure. So my closing remarks really is simple. Research, plan, plan, plan. There are resources out there that can help small and medium-sized businesses. Take advantage of them. Many of them, as I mentioned earlier, no cost or low cost. There are resources for businesses to be prepared and to be aware of what might be lurking underneath the surface of the water. And the SBDCs, and I'm sorry, it's a selfish plug because we're a no-cost organization, that we have prioritized cyber. Every SBDC across the nation has a priority with our federal funding to help businesses with their cyber. Not everybody is aware of that. So I can end it with saying, yes, I'm a public-private organization. We have federal funds, we have state funds, we have local funds. We are community to be here to serve the community. And yes, I am from the federal government, and we truly are here to help you.
Wonderful.
So we'll end it on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for participating today and giving your time up to share some fantastic insights to help small, medium-sized business. And just a reminder that there will be a special giveaway. All attendees, one per business, will receive 1 week free access to the DVMS Institute Digital Business Risk Awareness video training program. So please do reach out to us if you would like to take us up on that offer. Thank you very much. And just moving on to some future events that we will be coming up over the next couple of weeks. There will be a link to our event page in the chat, so go ahead and please register for the upcoming events. Now, Wednesday, the 29th of January, I'm not going to attempt to say this in Spanish, so I will give you the English title of this event. It will be The Tools to Lead the Human Side of Transformations, hosted by APMG International. And then on Friday, the 24th of January, we have a Capability for Change Survey Insights event, one not to be missed. So go ahead, sign up and register for the events. See you next time.